Hello friends, this is Hatim Rampurawala, and in this video we will continue with our standard of auditing revision, that is essay 230. Till last video we had completed essay 220 from the Pankaj Garg scanner. This scanner is this PDF file is actually basically a copyrighted PDF file of Pankaj Garg sir, but though it is freely available on the sir's Telegram channel, you can download it from there. Okay, so we will continue with our revision. Essay 230. First question: Mr. A practicing chartered accountant has been appointed as an auditor of the Through Private Limited. So A is a practicing chartered accountant. What factors should influence the amount of the working paper required to be maintained for the purpose of his audit? So for the purpose of his audit, what factors would influence the documentation? What factors influence the amount of working paper required? So how much, what kind of working paper required, the extent, the form content, extent of working paper required. So what factor influence the amount of working paper, that we have to state specifically, and this is most simple question. In this standard there are only 4 questions given. So this is the first one. Factors affecting the form content and extent of audit documentation. Essay 230, basically at the start we have to mention the auditor's responsibility, that his responsibility is that prepare the audit documentation of an audit of the financial statement. Whenever an auditor conducts the audit of the financial statement, he should prepare the audit documentation. Accordingly, the various factors may affect the form, content and extent of audit documentation are: first, size and complexity. So they are given 8. So I would be skipping the 6th one, though as it is just lengthy, that's why. Else you can read and write an exam, that too. Okay, we'll start. First, size and extent will affect the extent, form, content and extent of documentation required in an audit of financial statements. So size and complexity. Second, nature of an audit procedure. Then identified risk of material misstatement. Based on the risk identified, how much the risk is contained in a specific audit, based on that documentation can be obtained. Then significance of the audit evidence obtained. So the significance of the audit evidence obtained, based on that is one factor. Then the nature and extent of exceptions identified. So what all we read till now: first, size and complexity; second, the nature of the audit procedure; then the significance of an audit evidence, then the identified risk of material misstatement, the nature and extent of an exception identified. Then you can see the 7th point, the audit methodology and the tool used. And so based on audit methodology and based on the tool used, audit documentation depends on that is form, factor, extent, content depend upon the audit methodology and the tool used. And timely preparation of audit documentation, that is one factor. So we'll memorize that without looking. So what all were the factors? First, size and complexity of the entity; second, the nature of the risk identified. Wait a second. Nature of the audit procedure performed. Then identified risk of material misstatement. Then we had studied the significance of an audit evidence obtained, the audit methodology and the tool used, and last one was timely preparation of audit documentation. Okay, these are the factors basically. Then we'll move on to the next question, which states that discuss the auditor's responsibility to provide the access to his audit working paper to the regulators and the third parties. So what is the auditor's responsibility to provide access? Generally, working paper as per SQC 1 is the property of an auditor. That we all know, that is audit working paper are the property of an auditor, that is mentioned in SQC 1. Now, what is the responsibility to provide the access to the working paper to the regulator and third party? Okay, so we'll proceed. Answer: access to the working paper to regulator and third party. SA clause 1 Part 1 Second Schedule of Chartered Accountant Act 1949 states that the CA in practice shall be deemed to be guilty of the professional misconduct if he discloses the information acquired in the course of the professional engagement to any person other than the client without the consent of his client, otherwise than as required by law for the time being in force, otherwise than as required by the law. Okay, so unless and until it has been specified by the law to disclose that information, that is that working paper, auditor will not disclose. But if he want to, though, the consent of the client is necessary. That's what they have stated, and that's what this clause 1 part 1 part 2 second schedule also states of the Chartered Accountant Act 1949, that the CA will be deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he, a CA in practice basically, will deemed to be guilty of professional misconduct if he discloses the information which is required, that is actually the information, what we can say it as the working paper, if he discloses the information acquired in the course of his professional engagement to any person other than his client. So he is disclosing to any person, for instance a third person or a regulatory, without the consent of the client or otherwise than required by the law for the time being in force. Okay, now SA 200 on this essay also states that as basically 200 states that on the overall objective of an independent auditor and conduct of an audit of, in accordance with the standard on auditing, also reiterates that the auditor should respect the confidentiality information obtained, and should not, means he should maintain the confidentiality, and second, he should not disclose such information to any third person without specific authority or unless there is any legal or professional duty to disclose. So the first that clause, Chartered Accountant Act also states that unless he has taken the permission of his client and unless it has been specified by law or regulation to disclose, auditor should not disclose. In SA 200 also it has been given that he should maintain the confidentiality and he should not disclose such information to any third person without specific authority. Means if until unless he has been given by authority, and who will basically give the authority? The management, the company whose professional work, that is whose audit we have conducted, and or second thing, or unless the legal or professional duty to disclose, or whether any legal or professional there is any some duty to disclose the information. If there is a request to provide access by the regulatory, if there is a request by the access of regulatory, basically if the regulator asks for the data based on the legal requirement, the same has to be complied with after informing the client about the same. For instance, if there is an requirement of regulator that we have to submit any information of the client to the regulatory, that also to be done after informing the client about the same. So for instance, if we are uploading some information about the client, uploading some data in relation to audit, so we should take the permission of the management and then proceed to provide the information or provide the access to the regulator as well. And so in this we have to give 3 references in this part, where we have to state the answer that auditor's responsibility in relation to the working paper. That first reference will be of what we can say, Chartered Accountant Act 1949, Clause 1, Part 1, second schedule. Second, SA 200, that he should maintain confidentiality and he should not disclose unless specific authority and unless it is required by law or regulation. And even if they provide access to the regulators, he should inform the client about the same. Okay. And third, SQC 1, quality control of the firm that performs the audit and reviews of the historical financial information. This is the name of the SQC basically. And other assurance and related service engagement provides that, you can basically write an exam if you are not remembering the name in whole, that SQC 1 as per SQC 1 provides that unless otherwise specified by the law or regulation. So unless it has been specified by the law or regulation, audit documentation is the property of an auditor. This is what we had learned from our IPCC times, that audit working paper, audit documentation is then property of an auditor. It may at his discretion make portion of extract from the audit documentation available to the client, provide such disclosure does not undermine the provided that such disclosure which he has given to the client as well does not undermine the validity of the work performed, or in case of the assurance engagement, the independence of an auditor or of his personnel. So it should not undermine, it should not what we can say, basically breach the word we can use, breach the confidentiality or undermine the validity of the work performed or the assurance engagement, or in case if we say of the assurance engagement, the independence of the auditor should not be affected basically by that. So independence should not be affected, it should not be undermined the independently, it should not undermine the validity of the work performed. So as per SA 230, audit documentation serves a number of the additional purposes, including enabling the conduct of an external inspection. So based on the audit documentation, which can help in conducting of an external inspection in accordance with an applicable legal and regulatory requirement. Conclusion: it is the auditor's responsibility to provide access to his working paper, because that working paper belongs to the auditor. So it is the responsibility of the auditor to provide access to his audit working paper to the regulator when required by the law, whereas auditor is under no obligation to provide such a working paper to the third party. So we had seen all these references of company SA, that is a Chartered Accountant Act, SQC1, or SA 200 or SA 230. There is nowhere written that we have to provide the information to the that auditor can provide the information to the third party. They have only stated that it can be disclosed, the information can be disclosed after, and that too to the specific regulatory authority, and after taking prior permission or with the, see what their given wordings is, after informing the client about the same, that can also be disclosed. So conclusion is that auditor responsibility to provide access to his audit working paper to the regulator when required by the law, whereas whenever required by the law he can provide access to the working paper to the regulator, but there is no obligation to provide the access to the working paper to the third party. So we are done with this answer. Next, as an auditor, how would you deal with the following? How would you deal with the following? Statutory auditor of the holding company demands for the working paper of the auditor of the subsidiary company of which you are the auditor. So holding company's auditor is asking for demanding the working paper of the auditor of subsidiary company. So a subsidiary company auditor is under no obligation to provide such a documentation which he has maintained while performing of his audit to the auditor of the holding company. So he is not responsible, or he is not accountable, or he is not obligated to provide, because they are the property of the auditor. So we'll go through the answer. Access to the working paper. As per SA 230, audit documentation working paper are the property of an auditor. They are the property of an auditor. The auditor may at his discretion make the portion or extract of his working paper available to his client. So based on his discretion, what he can do is make the extract from his working paper available to his client as per SS 600 using the work of another auditor. Also states that the auditor should respect the confidentiality of the information required during the course of his audit work and should not disclose such information unless there is legal or professional duty to disclose. So while using the work of another auditor as well, auditor should respect the confidentiality of the information acquired during the course of his audit and should not disclose such information unless there is legal or professional responsibility or legal or professional duty to disclose. So the auditor of the statutory subsidiary company is under no obligation to disclose such working paper to the auditor of holding company. As per ICAI Guidelines, statutory auditor of an enterprise does not have any does not have a right of access to the audit working paper of the branch auditor. So the statutory auditor of the enterprise, that is holding company or the main entity, we can say, do not have the right of access, that he do not have a right that he can assess the working paper. So he do not have the right to assess the working paper of the branch auditor, or in case if there is a subsidiary, we can say subsidiaries auditor. An auditor can rely on the work of another auditor without having any right to assess the working paper of another auditor. So he can rely, because after taking into account all the what we can say, competency, capability, due care, diligence, what we can say, professionalism is not a basic word, means after taking due care, basically he can rely on the work of the competency and all. After looking into that, he can rely on the work of an branch auditor or rely on the work of an statutory auditor of a subsidiary company, but he has no right to assess the working paper of the other auditor. Conclusion: the statutory auditor of the holding company cannot have the access to to the audit working paper of the subsidiary company auditor. So do not have the access to the audit working paper of the subsidiary auditor. He can however ask the auditor to answer certain questions about the manner in which the audit is conducted. So he can ask the question that in how or in which manner the audit has been conducted and certain other clarification regarding the audit. So he can ask specifically questions regarding the audit. He can ask for the specific procedure he has performed while conducting an audit, but he cannot ask for the working paper. And the statutory auditor of the working of the subsidiary or the branch is also under no obligation to provide, because in nowhere, that is neither the SQC1 nor the SA 200 nor the what we can say Chartered Accountant Act, there is somewhere given that he should disclose. So basically he is under no obligation to assess the working paper of the subsidiary. Okay, now we will proceed on to the next question. B is a principal auditor of ABC Limited with 8 branches audited by 8 branch auditors. Okay, so B is a principal auditor. There are 8 branch of the company which are audited by the 8 other branch auditors. Means 8 branch auditors are different and the principal auditor is different. B wants to ensure that the work of the branch auditor are adequate for the purpose of his audit. So he want an assurance that the work is that their work is adequate basically. Hence he insists the branch auditor to get familiar with the checklist and he prepared for the branch. So he is providing basically the checklist to the branch auditors for performing the work in a specific manner, and to get familiar with the checklist he prepared for the branch, and besides require them to share the working paper. So he cannot ask to share their working paper. He can provide the checklist, but he cannot ask for the working paper complied by them for his review and return. Is the principal auditor within his right for asking such sharing of working paper? No, of course not. So we'll quickly go through the answer, because the concept is basically the same. They would have given the reference of CSS 600 that using the work of another auditor guides the principal auditor regarding the procedure to be performed when he is using the work of another auditor. So this essay states that guides the principal auditor regarding the procedure, that what all procedure he should perform, the principal auditor should perform when using the work of another auditor. Okay, as per SA 600, when principal auditor plans to use the work of a branch auditor, so SA 600 states that how should principal auditor deal with when he is using the work of another auditor. So when the principal auditor plans to use the work of the branch auditor, he should consider the professional competency of the other, as I said in the last question as well, that he cannot ask for working paper. He can for instance rely on the information or rely on the work being audited by the other auditor. So he should consider the competency of the other auditor in the context of the specific assignment. In specific assignment, he should consider whether he is competent or not. If the other auditor is not the member of an ICAI, if he is not a member of ICAI, he should perform the procedure to obtain the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence that the work of an other auditor is adequate for the principal auditor, and he should also ensure that the work being performed by that other auditor or the branch auditor is whether that work is useful or whether that work is adequate for the principal auditor for the purpose in the context of specific arrangements. So his work basically should be useful. He should be competent. He should check his competency if he is not a member of an ICA as per SA 200 audit documentation and SQC1 quality control of a firm that performs the audit and review of historical financial information and other assurance and related service engagement, unless otherwise specified by the law or regulation. Audit documentation is the property of an auditor. The principal auditor of an enterprise do not have the right of access to the working paper of the branch auditor. Principal auditor do not have the right to access the audit working paper of the branch auditor. So as I said, principal auditor do not have the right to assess the working paper of the branch. He can rely on the work of the branch auditor. Okay, in present case, Mr. B requires the branch auditor to share the working paper with him for the purpose of review. So in this question, what they have stated that in this present case he has asked to share the working paper. So conclusion, Considering the requirement of SA 600, using the work of another auditor, SA 230 audit documentation and SQC, one principal auditor is not right in asking for sharing of any working paper. So we are done with this essay, basically essay 230. In our next video we will continue with essay 240. Thank you for watching the video.